Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Wealth as a Team Sport. If you're new to this podcast, then welcome to the show. And we are going to have a really interesting interview with my person I've just met, Gavin Watson. He is a well-known podcaster, and what he really does is he shines a spotlight on veterans from around the world and, sharing their stories. And I was able to connect with Gavin. We have some common backgrounds. We've both been in the military. We're both doing podcasting and out on this adventure of communicating across this new media. But what really drew me to Gavin when I got to chat with him was, his understanding that we are all unique and we all have stories worth hearing. So I'm very excited to share him with you today. He's got an amazing biography, and I'll read that to you in just a minute. So welcome, everybody. And for any of you who are new to my program, I'm Tara Nolan, and I'm known as the advisor that helps you achieve and retain the lifestyle that you want. And you might be asking, well, why is a financial person having this kind of an interview? And it's really one of the things that's interesting about my business is it's all about relationships, and taking care of people starts with trust and communication. And so I like to share these interviews with people that I find interesting because it brings value to your life. And Gavin's going to share some really good insights about resiliency and coming through difficult challenges and all that kind of good information today. So Gavin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let me just take a minute to read Gavin's bio, so you just guys have really a good insight of who we're dealing with here. So I'm going to read this for a minute. Gavin Watson is a British Army veteran of 16 years. He joined the Royal Engineers in February of 2000, 3 years after the Army Cadets, and wanting to serve his country. Gavin toured Oman, Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Falkland Islands during his service. So he's kind of been around the world. And in 2007, Gavin completed the week-long Army Diver Aptitude course, finishing number 1 out of 5 from an initial field of 21 people. So he's no slouch. And then in 2008, he went to the Army Basic Divers course, where unfortunately he suffered an injury, so he was medically discharged from the Army in 2015. But it doesn't stop there. So Gavin, after having his hips replaced, he went and found a new passion for archery. And learning and adapting to that, he started competing. And then in the Army Indoor Championships, he took individual bronze. So this is a guy that was like in the Army and then being a diver, and now he's doing archery. So we're going to have some interesting stories to hear there. And then in 2014, Gavin actually went to the Invictus Games in London, where he won a gold medal in archery. So he kind of just picked it up and then seemed to be pretty good at it. So pretty impressive there. But what's really interesting about today is Gavin now has his own podcast where he creates a platform for other military veterans to share their stories and experiences. And his podcast, he gives the non-military people, civilians we like to call you guys, out there listening, a chance to gain an understanding of what military life is like, and then what a transition it is to go back from being in the military into civilian life. And here's, I think, one of the nuggets about Gavin that's really important is Gavin believes that regardless of your service, rank, or time served, every veteran has an experience to share, and sometimes they just need an opportunity to do it. So that gives us a good sense of what you're all about. So Gavin, again, so glad to have you on the show.
No worries. Yeah, thanks. When you asked me to come on, I was like, okay, I've never been on the other side and been a guest, so why not?
Right. It's pretty interesting. So I'm just kind of jump right in here, Gavin, and kind of take us back to your beginning. Like, how did you end up in the military? Because, I don't know about in the UK, but in America, I think it's like about only like 1 to 5% of the population ever does military service. So how did you end up in the military?
Yeah, so I don't know percentages, but it is not something you have to do. So it is all volunteer. And I think that's what makes the Brits and the UK, the Brits and the UK, the Brits and the Americans such a good force, because, they're all voluntary. And so, yeah, it kind of goes all the way back to my dad. My dad was in the British Army. And I don't know if anybody listening or watching has ever been to London, but he used to be one of those guards that stood near Buckingham Palace and
Oh, wow.
what do they call it? Marble Arch. So he was the one there in smart uniform. And I remember from a very, very young kid being in the barracks and seeing the horses and stuff like that. And then he left, and I still kind of like enjoyed the military type of stuff. So I'd buy like the soldier magazines and things like that. And then I joined the Army Cadets, which is something, I don't know if American has it or not, but it's basically for youngsters from 12 years up to 18 years. You can do Army stuff. There's also Navy and Air Force that you could join as well. But I chose to do the Army Cadets, and I really enjoyed it. And I was also a really good shot. So I was part of the Army Cadet team that actually flew over to Canada to represent the British Army Cadets for 6 weeks. So I even started traveling at a young age there. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this for real. I'm going to do this and serve my Queen and country. And then signed up. And that was at 16 years old. I was a young little kid, left school, tried college for a little bit for a few months, but it wasn't for me, not really academic. And then, yeah, signed on the dotted line and joined the Royal Engineers.
Wow, that's quite a story. Yeah, I think my story was more one of obstinance. I saw some airplanes fly, and I said I wanted to do that, and my advisor in school was like, "You can't do that. You were going to go be a veterinarian."
Yeah.
And so
that's weird. You mentioned that. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian, but because I was not clever enough and I didn't get the grades, there was no chance that was a path for me.
Well, it is tough. And I went to school with some people were getting their PhDs, some people were getting their medical degrees, and then some people were getting the vet. And they said the vet is the hardest one and the lowest pay. So you did okay. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you do you remember the point in time where the word civilian became part of your vocabulary?
Probably when I was in and people were moaning about them. It's something that's over here. You get used to the military life and everything's done, on time. And if it's not, people start shouting and it gets done quicker. And then the people that do work alongside civilians, they get a bad name, but reality is they're not bad at all. But yeah, once I was an adult, I suppose, whilst I was in the military, that's the word civilian became more important, and knowing who that was.
Yeah, I think for me it happened sometime in basic training, but I was slow to pick up on it. Like the first time they were going to let us go out in public, I came out and I didn't have my name tag on my uniform, and they're like, "Where's your name tag?" I'm like, "We don't wear that out in public, do we?"
Well, funny you mentioned that, actually, because that just reminded me of something. When I was in basic training, I think after week 5, they said, "You're going to stand out amongst the rest of the civilian population." And someone said, "Why?" Well, because you know how to march now, and you're going to walk straighter. So therefore, you're going to stand out. Okay. So yeah, that's the thing that you just reminded me. Thank you.
That's actually probably true. Really interesting. So now, I mean, we're going to kind of jump around a little bit, but one of the first things I'm really interested in is that you said you were a good marksman and you did that. So how did you find archery? Because after diving and your other military schools, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. So really, that stems back from, again, being a kid. I remember one summer camp I went to, they had archery. I gave it a go. And I remember I was really good. I would shoot my own balloons on my own target. And then I would be that kind of kid that would go and shoot other people's balloons on their target.
Right.
And I got praised for it, which was good. But then nothing happened whilst I was in the army until near the end. And that was after my injury, which we might touch on later. But I just wanted something that I could put my kind of mindset onto and give myself new goals and challenges. And with my injury, my upper body was kind of good. And I just remembered, you know what, let me see if I can find archery and what does a civilian club look like and can I do it? And yeah, luckily the camp I was part of, there was an archery club down the road. So I went there, did the basic course, the beginner's course, and found it was good and I enjoyed it and I was still good. I still had that marksmanship eye, and yeah, it took off from there. So that was 2013, I think. And then, as you mentioned earlier, the Invictus Games was the year later. So I'd only been doing it a year.
So see, that's phenomenal. So, and if you don't mind sharing, but how did you go from that? Because that must have been like a pretty dark place to kind of be, you know, medically. No one wants to be medically retired. You want to go on your own terms. Can you talk us through a little bit about that, like that state of mind, and how did you shift from being in that space to going, you know what, I'm going to look out ahead and I'm going to move forward and find something?
So at that point, when the Invictus Games came around in 2014, I hadn't been medic discharged, and I hadn't actually had that on the radar.
Okay.
But this was something that I wanted to do, as I mentioned, to give myself new goals and challenges, but potentially to, you know, give me a reason to stay in, you know, give them a reason to keep me in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that went. And I actually got medically discharged, what was it, probably a year and a half later after the Invictus Games. So yeah, it was something to do, something to keep me going, and maybe to give them a reason to keep me.
Right, right. So, yeah, and I'm hoping you can just talk a little bit about, kind of dovetailing into that, talk about resiliency. That's become like a very big topic. I know in the military, it's a huge topic that we discuss, but in my business life, we also are talking about resiliency and like coming through the pandemic and how people want more of this work-life balance. And I'm just interested for you, like, what are your thoughts on that for yourself? And then maybe also like with the different, because you have some amazing interviews that you're doing with different people that have gone through some very different experiences.
Yeah, so for me, resilience is difficult. It's difficult to learn that from an early age. I think you do have to go through bad stuff to understand what it's like to come out the other side. And whilst you're going through that, it can be difficult to see where the next step forward is actually going to come from. And so for me, my kind of the bits I've learned over the years is you're not alone. Like, reach out and ask people for help. You're not weaker. You're not a loser for asking for that help. And sadly, that's a lot of military personnel have that mindset. And I was one of those people. You can't ask for help because you'll be weak,
Oh,
regardless of being male or
absolutely.
female. But you would be weak. And so you're not, you know, in fact, reaching out and asking for help means you are a bit more braver than the average person. It means you are a bit more willing to, you know, build on your resilience. And then alongside that is to look forward or look for things that you are good at, things that you enjoy. Because if you hang your hat on one thing, that one thing's not going to last forever. That's just life. But having multiple things to work with, work towards, give yourself new goals, challenges, and work it all together is a way of building your own resilience.
Let me just even stop you right there, because you're just
Yeah.
reminded me of a story. Like when I was flying the simulator, and the 130, you do simulate engine out, and so it takes a lot of rudder because you have a lot of drag in the 130. If those are out, and it takes a lot of foot power. And I remember that the colonel that I was flying with, he actually asked me as the co-pilot. He said, "Hey, can you back me up?" And he had me help. And I was just like, "Wow, that's really cool."
Yeah.
But in that moment, because I was the co-pilot, when it came my turn to do the approach, I was going to be damned if I was going to ask for help. Because I still felt like, even though he had just modeled that for me, I still felt like I had to prove myself. Or if I asked for help, I was either too young, or I was the co-pilot, or, you know, the woman, you know, pick the whatever. And so that moment, even though he literally had just modeled that for me, I couldn't bring myself to ask for help. And I'm kind of interested if you have a story similar that you went through, because I think that's important for people to hear. It's super hard to ask for help, and I will forgive somebody else and I won't hold it against them, but I won't forgive myself or give myself that same space.
Yeah. And I also do think it is dependent on what you're doing. So that thing you just mentioned, that amazing bit of experience and story, you know, that's relevant to you. And maybe in that moment, it wasn't the best thing to ask for help, because like you said, you had to prove yourself. And for example, when I went through the Army diver training, you couldn't ask for help, right? Because that's the point of the training. So you know, you do have to be a bit savvy with it and understand when you can reach out. But what I'm talking about is if you get to a dark point, or if you get to a point where you don't feel like you can do it yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that's when to reach out. And it was the same, let's say it was with the Army diver. That would mean it's not for you. That would mean that you shouldn't be an Army diver, because you shouldn't be everything in the world. There's reasons we got pilots. There's reasons we got veterinarians. Not everybody can be everything. So it's just working out and learning yourself, and what you're good at, and therefore the resilience will come with it.
See, and I love that, but I've just struggled with that, and I'm wondering if you have thought of with one of your interviews, because I know when I started out life, I was like, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That was everything I wanted to do. And it was a struggle, because I got to be a pilot, but not the fighter pilot, and trying to deal with that feeling of, instead of being happy of what I achieved, I still, like, in my head, recorded it as, oh, it was another place where I fell short. And so what are your thoughts on that kind of a thing?
I think it comes with experience, and I've mentioned that before, but also being humble with yourself and being humble with others. Others are designed to be astronauts. Others are designed to be F1 drivers. We all can't do it. So I think it's just allow yourself to be humble, and allow yourself to accept bits in life. And that's what I've had to do multiple times.
Right. And that's like one of those things where, like, and if you don't have a good example, that's fine. But, like, how do you accept that? Because it's like one thing, like, you can intellectually go, well, I know it's okay, but how do you it's like when you start to feel that it's okay, that you really kind of move past something?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think if I've got to that point, I've looked at something else, and I've tried to grab onto something else that could potentially pull me out of that, if that makes sense. So go for it. Go for that question.
Yeah, I like that, because you pulled yourself out by looking forward and moving to that next thing.
Yeah.
And finding something.
So if we wind it back a bit, Army diver, that was a goal, because I was a civilian diver, and I'd been doing that for a year, and I was like, this is really cool. This is amazing. This is the missing piece in my life. This is just the best thing ever. And could I do this for work? Because Royal Engineers, we've got our own diving team, and it's really arduous. But before all of that, I had 3 years of back injuries. And so to get me out of the back injuries, I wanted to be that diver. And therefore I worked really hard to strengthen it, to have physio to get there. And then let's fast forward to when I passed the first course and was working on the second course, and I got injured. And then the big thing with my hips came out. Getting me out of that rut, or that hole, was archery. What could I do? And therefore grabbed archery, can do that, amazing and really good. This is now the bit that I'm missing out of my life. And I got better at that, and I just put my time and effort into it. I've also got one of those personalities that, I don't know what you call it, but I can't do one thing half-hearted. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it properly. And so, for example, like this podcast that I've got, I wanted all of the good equipment to make sure I could give the veterans the best chance to share their stories. So that's what I do. I have stuff to look forward to, and I have stuff to aim for.
So that leads right into that next question is, tell me, like, who or, what inspired you to do a podcast of all things?
Okay. I don't think I've been asked this before, so you're the first person. So back in 2018, I was touring the East Coast of America. So I was Washington, D.C., and I went down to Virginia Beach. So I did all that area. Mm-hmm. And I came across a podcast by Jocko Willink, which I'm sure most people have heard of, especially in America, hopefully. But he's a massive, US Navy SEAL. He's got his own podcast, and I was listening to his show. And I've always looked up to special forces, regardless of country. Mm-hmm. I was listening to his show, and it's amazing. And I listened to it for a year and a half nearly. And it was actually the beginning of 2020. So before this pandemic even kicked off, before that, I had an idea, and I was like, why is there no podcast like this in the UK? That's terrible. I wonder if I could do it. I've got no broadcasting background. I don't really know. I know how to take a good picture, but I don't know how to do video. But I wonder if I could. And so I spent I wanted to launch it later that year, later in 2020.
Mhm.
The pandemic happened and lockdown in the UK happened. So I was able to kind of like get the equipment and spend a bit more time than usual on it. Well, so I suppose, silver lining and all that. But yeah, I wanted to launch it at the end of the year. I wanted to have a good 8 months of learning the equipment, getting some people involved, and let these people within the UK share their stories and experiences. You mentioned at the beginning from my autobiography thing that regardless of service rank and time served, everybody has got something to share. And that's very true. Now, there's a lot of people that I know that have left the military and then they've written books and people have learned from them some amazing stuff. But not everybody's going to have the time, not everybody's going to be able to write, and not everybody's going to have the money to publish a book. So hopefully I can do a podcast, and therefore the troops on the ground will have the opportunity to share their stories, and also the people that have written books. I'm not going to say no to them, but invite them on the show and just do it once a month, nothing over the top, so I get burnt out or anything like that. And then therefore their legacy is left behind. And then the final thing that really, really pushed me to do it was, I don't know if you've heard, all the listeners that are listening now have heard of the person called Sir Captain Tom Moore. So he did an amazing thing for our NHS, which was for his 100th birthday. He wanted to do 100 laps around his garden, and he raised loads and loads of money, like millions of pounds, for our NHS whilst it was supporting us. But the crazy thing was, why did it take us 99, 100 years to learn about him and hear his stories from World War II? It just didn't make sense. So that's another reason why I wanted to do it.
See now, and I love that, and it's interesting as I've been taking a course on putting together like a keynote talk, and one of the things that the speaker said was, well, the market is kind of saturated with military people telling their stories, and it's interesting because their thought was, well, you have to go down into the story, but then what people want to hear is, then how did you come through it? And do you find when you're interviewing a lot of these people and they tell their stories, like, are they stuck in the victim place of the thing that happened to them, or are they able to take that hard part of their life and learn from it and then bring it out into like the moral of the story, or what are they doing now? Where do you find people are when you interview them?
Well, I find that people that come on the show are typically the ones on the other side. I think the ones that are in the deep, dark ruts, they're not willing to come on the show, and that's fine. When they're out, they will come and share. And so, yeah, people are willing to explain and express what they've gone through. And in actual fact, at the end of most of my episodes, I do ask, how was it for them? And a lot of them say, well, actually really good. And how long have we gone for? Wow, I didn't realize I spoke for that long. So it's kind of like a little bit of a therapy for them as well. And lastly, you mentioned about the market saturated. Fine, the market saturated. I'm not doing this for 7 billion people. I'm doing it for their family, so that if and when they do, leave us, their legacy is left behind for the rest of their family.
I really like that. You just had reminded me, I remember years ago, we had a discussion panel that I saw that talked about, like, for the United States and the UK, where the military is a volunteer service, there's kind of this agreement with society that people in the military will take on some of the dangerous roles in trying to promote democracy and keep freedom and keep everybody safe. But the social contract then is that the veterans are cared for. And, there's just different things coming up, like I'm seeing in the news now, like burn pits and different things that our veterans were exposed to, and they're not necessarily getting the care that comes on the backside of it. And I wonder if, like, at least for us, it's a change where, during Vietnam, everything was on the news. But for the last, the time we've been in Afghanistan, it really hasn't been in the news. So a lot of people are able to kind of go about their lives, not really being aware that the country's been at war. What kind of experiences have you seen? I'm interested from the UK perspective.
So within the UK, sadly, we don't actually get any help, full stop. I know some states are actually pretty good with their veterans. I've got family that live in America, so I am exposed more than probably some Brits to what America goes through. which I think is great. Those states do an amazing thing for their veterans. And sadly in the UK, once they discharge you, or once you sign off and leave, that's it. You're not allowed back on camp. You're not allowed to any medical support, and that's where the things like the NHS step in and support us. And we have a lot of charities in the UK, so the likes of Help for Heroes and Royal British Legion. They're massive charities that are there to try and help and support us veterans, going through these difficult times or injuries. But yeah, I don't know if that's going to change. Something fairly recently, either this year, or I think it was this year, we actually got passed through government that we get a veteran rail card. We get a third off the railway. But it's that's one thing. But yeah, we don't really get that well looked after in the UK.
So it's really interesting about the social contract, because then it makes you go, because I know I have people say, well, it's volunteer service, so why are you doing it? And I don't know, I just think some of us are kind of wired that way, that we want to be involved in something bigger than ourselves. I don't know, what would you say the reason is why do people do something when there's not the care at the other end?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people join stuff like the Army, Navy, Air Force, even the police or fire service to aim for that care at the end. I think they do it for the here and now and want to help others and want to, learn stuff themselves and make themselves better. And like you say, I think there's certain people wired in a certain way that get enjoyment out of it, and makes them, or gets them that drive to go forward and go up the ranks, and maybe even like that kind of structure that you find in the military. But why people do it, I think that, like you said, they're just wired that way. Or they have that kind of like inkling from friends or family that have done it, and they want a taste of it. It's like when you get someone has a good beer and they rave how amazing it tastes. You got to try it, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting study, but I think I would agree is that if you're that personality type that really likes to immerse in experiences now, because no one in my family had a military background, so it was very odd when I reached out to do that. They were like, "So what now?" But I always say about my military experiences, I've had a lot of experiences that I wouldn't wish on anybody else, but I wouldn't give any of them back.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think also you learn, you definitely learn different things. But I also feel that once you've gone through the military, regardless in fact of if you've been abroad, but I think it's more so if you've been abroad on deployment or on a task, you appreciate what you got at home a bit more. You appreciate that we got good roads. People moan about potholes. That's nothing compared to a dirt track in a country that doesn't even have tarmac. So I think you do then appreciate things when you come out.
So, gosh, this time, like you were saying, is just flying by. If there was like one idea or thought that you would want to leave with the audience, like either, as a moral of the story, or, a way they can support veterans, or just, a philosophy on life, what would it be?
I'd say veterans definitely want support. I would say maybe hang back from the good old question of have you shot anybody? That seems to be the go-to for a lot of civilians. We don't. That's one thing we don't join up for. We're just trained to do it if it happens. So that's one thing. But talk to a veteran, ask where they've been. Be curious, and regardless of being in the military or not, the resilience part that you mentioned, find something that you enjoy, and if you're not enjoying it, change it. And that can be from work, that can be from hobbies, and that can be from life. You've got to enjoy life. We're here one time, so live it.
That's great. So guys, listening up, we're almost out of time, and I just wanted to kind of recap some of the key things that really have resonated with me that Gavin has shared. Is one is I really like the way Gavin, if you look at his bio, he's always, wherever he's at, he's looked for that next thing. And I think we could all learn from that in terms of resiliency. So whether you're in your business or in your military or just with your friends, supporting people, if you see someone that's kind of hanging out and struggling, try to help them figure out, ask them the question, what does happiness look like for you? Or what does fun or success look like for you? And try to help people see that light for that next thing. So thank you for sharing that, Gavin. With the podcast, I really like that Gavin pointed out that it doesn't matter your age, your rank, any of that. Everybody has a story to tell. And I would just say, Gavin, thank you very much for what you're doing. That really hit home that you're doing this podcast for people's families and to create that legacy. You're not doing this for, to make money or fame or those kind of things. Those will be natural byproducts because you're doing good work. But I think that really stuck with me, that the focus of what you're doing is everyone has a story, every veteran has a story, and you're recording it for posterity and creating that legacy. So that's really cool. So Gavin, if someone wants to connect with you and find out about your podcast and be able to listen to that, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can type in Military Veterans Podcast into social media. That's going to be there. You can also type in milvetpodcast.com. That's the website, and that has links to everything else. And also just search for that Military Veterans Podcast on YouTube. And it would be amazing if you could subscribe there, as I'm aiming for 1,000 subscribers to get a community channel segment on the channel, so that we can actually communicate across the world.
Okay, people, you heard it. Sign up and help Gavin get that target of 1,000 subscribers. So that's a cool thing. So Gavin, is that when you get 1,000, then that's what lets you create that community?
Yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Excellent. So I'm excited to hear about all the success that you guys, I bet this is going to inspire you to think of a veteran that that you should have reach out to connect with Gavin. I think at this point, Gavin may have more people in the queue than he has time, because he's only doing one a month. But that's excellent, because there's stories to be told, and connecting with someone like Gavin that can help. He's taken the time to learn how to put that out there is wonderful. So don't forget that you can share this interview with your friends and family. Please share it on your social media sites. The more people that can spread around, the more that Gavin's work can be out there. So thank you so much, and can't wait to hear about your success. Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.